2000s, and it can shapeshift its body when predators are near, and it kind of gets all spiky. And then once the predator goes away, it goes back to normal. So it kind of, hints at a sense of bodily change and differences kind of as needed to kind of survive some sort of threat that's near. So that's kind of the metaphor behind it. So I feel like that's good to keep in mind going into it at least. But this first section starts when I was in 6th grade, had no cues, at least at the time that I was transgender, didn't exist in my mind, didn't exist in my parents' mind, no idea about it. But it kind of starts talking about it a little bit. Okay. My body as feminine. In 6th grade, I wandered down into the basement and dug in the plastic tub that held Nerf guns, toys that hadn't seen the light of day for years, and little bouncy balls, like the ones you'd get from the machines at Old Navy. I pulled out some bouncy balls. I felt each ball's texture, rubbing my thumb across them. There was a yellow tie-dye one that was shiny, but also had a very plastic, rubbery texture. My thumbs, sweating just from this act I knew I was not supposed to be doing, made a squeak noise on the surface. I threw it back into the bin. I picked up one that was a purpley pinky color. This one was the same size, and it could easily fit into the palm of my hand. But the texture was different. It was softer. It was plastic, but there was almost like no waxy finish that was added to it. It was perfect. I took the little ball into my dad's bathroom, the only one in the basement, and cleaned it thoroughly. The smell is so distinct for me. I can't quite explain it. Just wash rubber with soap and water. You'll know what I mean. I pulled down my pants, set the ball in the trough of my underwear, right where my pad would normally go, and pulled everything back up. I arranged the ball so that there was just the slightest bulge in my pants underneath my basketball shorts. I turned to the side to admire it. I wore the ball around the house, rearranging it to snap a picture with my brick of an LG Cosmos phone, the one with the sliding keyboard. Those were revolutionary back then. But I'd erase the picture right away. Then I'd take the ball out and throw it in the garbage. I'm not supposed to be doing this. This isn't what girls do. I'm not a boy. I repeated this process until there were no bouncy balls left in that tub. Other attempts were simpler. As a preteen, I got a majority of my clothes from Justice. The smaller clothing items, like panties, shorts, bras, etc., were arranged on these circular tables that looked more like they were meant to have Asian cuisine eaten off of them. I wandered to one with what I called booty shorts on them. Realistically, they showed no booty. They came down to maybe an inch or two below the butt, but they were shorter than what I was used to. This pair was a basic orange with white stitching. I looked at the shorts, hesitant, but I felt like there were voices in my head, all telling me how pretty I could look in them. I got home and slid the orange shorts on. I couldn't bring myself to wear them. I felt exposed, naked, just not myself. My Aunt Jean said they looked nice on me, but they sat in my dresser drawer until we donated them to the church's free fleet. And then this next part plays off of Melissa Phoebos's article in the New York Times where she was talking about how she got breast reduction at about maybe 30 years old or so. And she says, by the time I was 12, my body felt like a disguise I couldn't take off. My body too was a disguise that I wanted to succumb to, but could not. No amount of clothing could convince me that this was how my body was supposed to be. I must have to make my body myself, I decided. Those orange shorts represented femininity, something I not only avoided, but completely rejected in my teenage years. If I wore shorts like all the other girls at school, I'd have to shave more leg hair, and I'd worry about the tightness showing everyone when I was on my period, the outline of the pad making it clear. I feel uncomfortable. I once let my sister put nail polish on me, but that one time was more than enough. I know for kids growing up today, things like makeup, nail polish, pink, traditionally boy or girl things were embraced as being for all children. But even as recently in the early 2000s, this was not as much the case. I was still raised with the mentality, be it purposeful, which I don't think was the case, or an effect of society's subliminal messaging, that boys do boy things and girls do girl things. When my sister put nail polish on me that day, my fingers felt heavy. My mom showed me how to get it off with the remover, which reeked of chemicals and slight lemon. Heck, my child mind denoted non-feminine things as feminine somehow. Two, it took me until high school to finally let my mom smack some Aquaphor on my hands. And only a year ago, I started using chapstick religiously, as most of my life I had equated it to lipstick. It was 1924 when Freud decided that anatomy and biology were the key determiners of our gender. Time claims that critics have been objecting to body parts as central predictors of one's professional and personal path since then. Teaching LGBTQ history provides a slideshow of how gender roles and norms in the US have changed over time. In the Victorian era, there were rigid gender roles. Women were taught to be kind, tender, emotional, and domestic. They were expected to cook, clean, and take care of the children. Men were thought to be strong, logical, tough, and aggressive. They were expected to participate in politics and make money. In the Second Industrial Revolution, women, especially poor women, were sought after by factory employees as they generally had smaller hands, which was good for machine work. Employers could also pay women and children less than adult men. Women became very active in factory work, especially in the Northeast's textile mills. In the early 1900s, the beginning of feminism, women began to do men's work and began to fight for equal political rights. White women are given the right to vote via the 19th Amendment. Flapper fashions had women expressing themselves more sexually. During World War II, women became primary manufacturers for the war, and Rosie the Riveter became an icon. In the 1960s, women had access to birth control, could go to Ivy League schools, and more. Equal pay began to be a hot topic in many debates. As society continues to evolve and grow, it's almost as if men and women's roles intertwine, blurring the lines between what to associate with men and what to associate with women. Women start out with absolutely no autonomy over themselves, their abilities, and their bodies. By now, the degree of women's autonomy is significantly more, but still fluctuating, especially with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In 2023, language around gender is blurring. More and more people are saying that men can have babies, that the term mother is inconsiderate and discriminatory. But it's not men who can have babies, it's transsexual men, those born female who suffer from gender dysphoria. But does that mean men can have babies? Could I have a baby? Sure, I could, if I wanted to, I suppose. Who gives anyone bodily autonomy? Does it come with our first breath of life? Does it come with our first words? Can it be taken? Can it be given back? Can it be gained by changing our bodies? My mom taught me how to shave in 8th grade. She handed me a razor and told me the 2 basic steps. Put soap all over your leg and shave in the opposite direction that the hair falls. I wandered into the shower and spent the next 30 minutes doing just that. I felt my leg afterward, amazed that this soft skin was hidden beneath the seemingly unruly leg hair that had grown a year or 2 ago. I continued this routine every week. I could not have any leg hair showing because the other girls at school didn't have any, and neither did my own mom. With puberty came pubic hair, which was even thicker than my leg hair. When I'd have to change pads at school, I made sure to grip the hair tightly and slide the piece of toilet paper downward so I got the blood clumps out entirely. My privates began to disappear in the forest until I couldn't see what was down there anymore. When did I lose my bodily autonomy? Maybe it was after that moment that I noticed the hair that ran all over my legs, or maybe it was when I first felt my armpit hair, which was just as thick as the rest of my hair. And my mom told me I had to shave it because girls don't have armpit hair. In 2010, my Aunt Ruthie posted a picture on Facebook of me, my cousin, and my younger sister at the pool. My sister stands to the far right, her bright blonde shoulder-length hair contrasting the top of her one-piece suit. The bottom half was bright pink with typical white flowers on it. My cousin has frizzy brown hair that is slightly longer than my sister's. She wears a turquoise bikini that shows the most skin out of all 3 of us. And then there's me, not even in a traditional women's bathing suit. I wore a pink rash guard with flowers, still girly enough, and a pair of pink swim trunks that came down to the middle of my thigh. My shoulders were slumped forward just a tad, and my obscene, straight across the forehead bangs covered my eyes. I used that outfit to hide, to obscure my body, Not only was the body hair a thing to hide, but most of my body had to hide too. When I felt this urge to hide as much of my body as possible, that's when I lost my bodily autonomy. And I'll stop that one there. And then this next section kind of jumps in time a little bit to when I found out what being transgender was and kind of started to look into it a bit more, and that kind of came into the realm of possibility for me and just an idea kind of floating around. In late 2014, I sat in the computer room when a video popped up in my recommended list, Transgender Teens Fall in Love. A young couple sits on a raft in the middle of the lake. The young woman wears a white bikini with some blue and purple on it, while the young man wears some colorful swim trunks, exposing his nude chest to the world. The two splash their feet in the water and chit-chat, all while smiling. The two begin to splash about even more. They move the raft slowly. The video cuts to a side-by-side picture of both the girl and the guy when they were younger. They didn't look as comfortable when they were younger. The before picture of Katie, the girl, shows a little boy. The boy is smiling, widely in fact, but it's the wideness of that smile that makes it seem forced, like the boy wasn't truly there on the inside. Katie beams now. Her smile is natural, less intense. Yes, she has longer hair and around her face, and yes, she is a girl, but it's the smile that shows that she's made her body hers. The video now shows a before and after of Aarron, the guy in the trunks. In his before, Aarron too is smiling, as Katie was. His grin isn't as large and present as hers was. It's more casual, a small smile that he didn't put his whole heart into. His lips are rimmed with a shade of lipstick that any young girl would love, and he has a matching bow slightly hidden in his long brown hair. Now his smile, like Katie's, says home. Katie now drives by herself. Through the window, the viewer can watch the lush green trees pass by. With a microphone on her shirt, Katie tells us she is worried for her boyfriend as he underwent major surgery to remove his breast tissue. The green pushes along with the car as she reassures the viewer that Aarron is ready for this drastic change. She knows it, and he knows it too. Katie gets out of the car and walks up to the front door of a house. She knocks, and Aarron opens with a smile. The couple hugs each other as Katie's excitement escapes from her lips. Once the two release each other, Katie looks eager to feel her boyfriend's designer chest. She does so gently. The two are in Aarron's bedroom now, where, in the safety of his room, he bears his chest with pride. Katie looks on in awe. Aarron tells her he still has some scar tissue where anesthesia was given, and where the drain holes have now closed up. Aarron himself speaks about his chest. When you're transgender, you learn that your outside doesn't matter. It's what's on the inside. I look in the mirror now, and I see what I've always seen. The couple decides to celebrate Aarron's return home with a day out on the lake. Aarron drives a white, clean motorboat as Katie sits on the bow in all her glory. Now the couple is kissing. Aarron's rainbow-striped shorts match Katie's white Aeropostale bikini. They're back on the raft now, looking into each other's eyes, smiling. I could change. I could be a man. I could be like Aarron. Almost instantly, I knew this was the avenue for feeling like me in this body. Being a man will allow me to feel some sort of self-love. An email I sent to my mom on February 2nd, 2015. Dear Mom, I would like to tell you this in person, but it causes me too much stress and anxiety to even think of it. So I'm just writing you instead. These last few weeks, maybe for over a month now even, I've been confused about who I am, as well as questioning some things. This isn't a bad thing though. Everyone has to find who they are in life. But in order to find myself out, I would appreciate if you would allow me to talk to someone who has no knowledge of me and cannot judge me easily, like a therapist. More specifically, a gender therapist. I feel that talking to someone like this will help me figure out a lot about myself and maybe discover some new aspects as well. I've been wanting to do this since winter break because I believe it will truly help. Parents always want to help their kids however they can, right? It doesn't have to be very expensive and fancy, but just someone well educated and good. I would also like that for now, if you please do not bring this up in person just yet, because, like I said earlier, it gives me a lot of anxiety. I just ask that you would consider and think about this option and not treat me any differently than you already do. I'm still the same. This would all be a great help to me. Thank you. A response from my mom after I sent that email. Your dad and I will do whatever we can to help you in any way. It will take a little bit of time to locate someone for you to talk to, but I will let you know when we arrange it. We love you, Mom. But can I live a fulfilling life as a woman? I tried that, and it didn't work. Okay. And then this next little snippet looks at when I actually, after medically transitioning with hormones, I went to DC and had an actual double mastectomy at about, I think I was about like 19 or 20 at that time. Or, as it says right here, I was 22 apparently. All right. Unnecessary destruction. When I was 22 years old, my mom and I traveled to Washington, D.C. so I could have a surgeon remove my breasts, which I never wanted, as per my medical treatment for gender dysphoria. My mom and I zombied out of the house around 4 a.m. as the surgery was scheduled for 9 a.m., but we had to be at the hospital by 6 a.m. She wasn't happy about my decision, but she agreed to be my transportation to and from. We drove down the 2-lane highway that leads right into D.C. She followed me around the hospital as I was ordered to go to the admin desk, then the prep area, just all over the place. I sat in a wheeled hospital bed, separated from all the other patient beds by curtains. A short nurse told me to take my clothes off and hop in. Then some other woman came in to do something I don't remember, and then an anesthesiologist came in to explain the process of going under to me as a fourth woman put my IV in. Then the man himself, Dr. Ramanini, came in to make sure I was all good to go. I laid in that bed for maybe an hour minimum before all of those people came in. And that entire time, my breasts were sweating like it was 90 degrees in that hospital. These were my last moments with them. These nouns I had been taught were things to be accepted, valued even, yet also things I had to hide. I no longer wanted them. Sometimes I consider what my life would be like now had I kept them. Would I still be wearing my binder every day? Would I have eventually learned to accept my breasts as much as I could? What if more people had touched them? Maybe it's similar to the single thought people often have before getting a tattoo. This part of my body will never be naked again, but instead my brain is finally comprehending I'll really never experience breasts again, in a good or bad way. Melissa Febo shared her thoughts before having breast reduction surgery, saying that it was a bizarre sensation to look at my breasts for the last time. There would be some of the same tissue, yes, and a new nipple cut from the old one, but the breasts I had spent so many years wishing different, their particular weight would be gone forever. In the surgical theater, the body is sacred only to its inhabitant. It didn't sneak up on me, the strange feeling of sacredness, as my surgeon squeezed and measured and scrawled on my breasts with a marker on the morning of my surgery. Had my breasts also been sacred? What if I had embraced my body like the painted women in Times Square? I kept pictures of my breasts in my old phone in the hidden folder on Snapchat. They eventually made their way to my old computer when I backed up the phone before getting a new one. Now those breasts sit in my photos on my current phone, unhidden and there for anyone to scroll through and see. The same picture is on my surgeon's new website, showing my before and after. That day I had them removed, I never thought about the idea of regret or even remembrance. I wanted them gone, and I was happy to do so. But when I look at those pictures, something within me wants to remember what it was like having them. What did it feel like when I rolled over in bed and they would plop onto my arm? Could I feel them when I bend down to get something off the floor? 2 weeks after my surgery, I had to venture back into DC to get my drains and bandages removed. The sterile office air combined with the smell of my body that hadn't taken a proper shower in 2 weeks. The doctor unclipped the mesh binder, pulled the thick bandages from over my nipples and the longer ones from over the incisions, and pulled the drains out, which felt like fresh, wet spaghetti slapping against my underarm. With everything off, Dr. Ramanini asked, "Would you like to get up and look in the mirror?" I slid off the chair and shuffled my way over to the mirror, and I was devastated. My chest was painted a mix of oranges, yellow, maroons, and purples. One of the incisions was noticeably longer than the other, coming to the center of my chest instead of an inch from it. And my nipples, well, they just looked gross and as brown as a Hershey's chocolate bar. I made a big mistake, my brain told me. For the next 2 weeks, I had to dress the nipples and keep them moisturized so they would reattach themselves. Keep bandages over them to protect them as they healed, and apply scar cream to the incisions daily. I also had to keep the compression binder on, so yay for that. Over the next 2 weeks, the Hershey's brown of my nipples peeled away, exposing the healthy light pink ones underneath, which had successfully connected back onto the skin. From there, they began to darken back to their original color. I watched my body heal itself. I made it do this, I thought. It sure looks horrible, but I'm also willing to put my body through anything so I can love it. Okay. And then this last section, this one kind of gets into the realm of bodily acceptance and kind of maybe if like our lives aren't perfect and our bodies aren't perfect no matter what we do to them, but you can still, accept them and learn to love what you have or what you've done to your body in some way. So, okay. The frog must change over and over every time a predator threatens it. I too must change when my own self threatens me. I told myself that my 3rd grade squish was ugly. I told myself I was a boy. I told myself I was unlovable in this body unless I gave myself a penis. I told myself so many things. I was confronted so many times by my own predator, myself, so I changed. I see a body that has no scar to stare at every time I put socks on, that doesn't have a distorted pointer, with knees the correct color, with clean wrists, unscarred by a tetherball game, with narrowed hips and a flatter ass, with the smallest tummy possible, with nipples I can feel, that is flat without needing to cut, with more hair and less of a forehead, that can create life, that can have sex wherever, whenever, without jumping through hoops. I see a body that cannot exist. The frog changes itself from what is expected to something surprising. It distorts, mutilates even, its body for protection. I am that frog. My body had to change for it to become one that I could live in. My body has to be mine to survive. I wonder if that's why I'd hack into my wrists at least once a day throughout high school, to show my eyes that this body is mine. Does the scar on my foot make my body mine? Does my chest make my body mine? What about the tattoos? The first thing that stood out to me when I met AJ, my fiance, was that his hair and beard were a different color. His hair is more of a light brown color, while his beard is nearly all red, with some blonde thrown in it at the roots. I can also tell you that he has a multitude of tattoos, ranging from a half-realistic, half-geometric monkey to some cool gear patterns. He has pale blue eyes that shine in the sunlight and amazing lip freckles. His body is a mixture. Parts of him came naturally, things that make him who he is. Other parts were added. Steven, a guy I hooked up with at an abandoned asylum, had an ice cream tattoo. Q had cow paintings in his room. Mike had dreadlocks. I barely remember, nor do I care for any of these men anymore, but I can still think of what made them them, in my mind at least. I see a body that has a white scar to stare at every time I put socks on, that has a distorted pointer, with differently colored knees, with marked wrists, scarred by a tetherball game, with wider than normal hips and a big ass, with an anatomically correct tummy, with nipples I cannot feel, a chest that is flat by needing to cut, with less hair and more of a forehead, that wants to create life, and that cannot have sex wherever, whenever, without jumping through hoops. I see a body that is real, that is mine. Maybe I don't need to achieve bodily autonomy, confidence, pride. Maybe I've already found it without realizing it. But still, when my dad came to me before I had my chest surgery those years ago, I was sitting at the kitchen table, minding my own business, when I heard his footsteps approaching behind me. He knelt beside me as if talking to a 5-year-old. He looked up at me. "You know, you're really upsetting your mother with all this. Why would you mutilate your body?" When I stood in front of that mirror, in front of the collage of yellows, purples, and oranges, maybe my mutilation did not make me pretty. However, when I lay shirtless in AJ's lap, and he ran his fingers across my scars, when I lay with him in bed and he puts an arm around me to hold me close, when I told him I haven't shaved down there in a week, sorry, yet he still enjoys himself, when my IUD destroyed our sex life, and his fingers come out caked in blood, when I stand naked in the hotel room after getting a shower warmed up. When he tells me it's your body, so it's your choice, when I asked him about input for birth control methods, when he said he'd be fine using condoms all the time, when he introduced me to his older brother and then sister and her partner, and finally his mother, when I couldn't have sex for 2 weeks before my IUD was put in, when he told me I'm cute the first day we started talking. Although I may have a harder time believing AJ when he says he doesn't mind my lack of breasts, my excess fat on my tummy, my thinning hair, and my often problematic vagina, I still believe him when he tells me that he loves me. I feel like that since you tell me you love me every day, I'm starting to believe it more and more, I tell him. When I sat in my old endocrinologist's office, listening about all the side effects of testosterone, a deeper voice, body hair, genital growth, possible infertility, she told me. I didn't mind the idea of infertility then. I never want to have biological kids, I told her. But my mom still asked, are you sure? I began to inject myself in my stomach, inner thighs, and outer thighs every week for the rest of my life. But then I sent a text to my best friend. I feel like I'd have a child with AJ. For my whole life, I've only wanted to adopt, but I feel like I'd be okay with having a baby with him. I've never had that feeling before. I told AJ that I didn't want to carry a child, that we should look into a surrogate. I googled the cost of one, and the average minimum is $30,000. The average cost of having a baby yourself is less than half that at around $13,000. With decent insurance, the cost can even be as low as $500. I've always been a money-conscious person, so carrying a single kid myself sounds like the better option in that case. But can I mentally handle carrying a baby? A study was done on pregnancy in transgender men. 25 transgender men reported using testosterone before pregnancy, and out of those, they reported resuming menstruation within 6 months after stopping testosterone. 5 participants conceived while still amenorrheic from testosterone use, and after pregnancy, 6 participants who had not previously used testosterone before pregnancy initiated use. 10 participants who had previously been on testosterone reported that they not yet resumed testosterone after possibility. There's the possibility that if I wanted to, I could have a baby with this man I love, who taught me that I could be loved, that I deserve love. We stand in line for a concert in the drizzle. My teal cat and dog umbrella keeps us dry, except for our calves and the backs of our ankles. We got there an hour before the doors opened so we could get a good seat and find a decent spot. The space feels oddly personal, even though people are in front and behind us, but they're in their own little worlds too. Every couple and group are talking with themselves. AJ and I discuss how adorable it would be to bring our future child, who we have nicknamed Little Hap, per her assumed initials, to concerts, complete with an oversized metal t-shirt and noise-canceling headphones. We continue to talk about kids and discuss surrogacy in our future, but I tell him it's expensive. He asks me, well, can you not carry a baby? I tell him no. He asks why. I remind him that biological men do not carry babies, and if I want to be as close to a biological man as possible, I shouldn't either. Having a baby is a woman's thing, or maybe having a baby is a female thing, and my body is and always will be female. One day after I take a shower, I stand in front of the bathroom mirror. I turn to the side and lean my torso back a bit so that my stomach sticks out a bit more. I set a hand on my stomach, making it look rounder. I am silent, just staring. I think about the first time I went to therapy to figure out what was going on regarding my sex and gender mismatch between my mind and my body. My therapist, Kathy, asked me if I ever felt maternal instinct. Felt like a woman, she phrased it. No, I told her. All right, I'll stop there.
For now.
Yeah.
You can use my that's right.
All right. I mean, I can read that.
Does that feel good to you?
Yeah.
Was that fun?
Yeah, it was fun.
Your work with other people. So now we just talk? Is that what
If you want,
all right.
I can tap dance if you want.
So I like the excerpts that you chose, and I went back through them, and when you were younger, so I see similarities in us, in our journeys, and I see major differences, and I think a lot of the differences are due to our age difference. I'm 54, you're how old?
26.
26. Less than so I'm curious, what I was curious about, so your experience going down in the basement with the balls, the bounce balls. And did you know what you were going into the basement for?
Yes, it was kind of like, because growing up, I was never girly at all. I had an older brother and a younger sister, so I was kind of always a tomboy, pretty much. Like, I wore my brother's hand-me-down clothes and wore cargo shorts and didn't like shaving and all that, so I knew what I was kind of up to, but at the same time, I was like, oh, this, normal people don't do this. Like, there's something, like, this is, like, weird, pretty much.
Did you think, like, you might get in trouble or something?
Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, my mom can't catch me, and she'd be in the other room, and I'd be like, oh, no.
I'm wondering if you can sort of verbalize the feeling of having that image, you know, because so much of trans journeys are sort of overwhelmingly preoccupied who we are with the image we portray to others. So, I mean, at that time, were you hoping to, like, just see what it felt like to kind of look like that? Like have a boy thing?
Yeah, I think it was kind of along the lines of some sort of mixture of, like, I felt a little more comfortable looking that way, especially wearing my brother's clothes and, like, really short shorts. Like, if they were above the knee, they were a no for me, pretty much, but kind of a mixture of, like, oh, what would this look like, kind of in relation to my body, in a sense, and, like, not wanting, like, other people to see it, but kind of seeing how it felt to me. But I didn't know any of that at the time. It was unknown to me at the time, but I was looking back at it, I think I was definitely trying to see how it made me feel, and I think from what I remember, it felt somewhat positive, but there was still that overwhelming sense of, like, oh, I'll get in trouble if I do this, or if someone catches me doing this, or, like, even I was worried because I would just throw them out after, and there were only so many bouncy balls down there, so oh, if Mom sees they're gone, then she'll be like, what happened to all them? But I don't think she cared enough about them to notice that they were gone.
There's more fun stores with more fun bouncy balls. I'm also, you seem to have this sense of bodily autonomy or choice early, maybe around that time, and I know that you go into talking about some self-harm and liken it to tattooing and sort of this mutilation in the metaphor of your entire book that you are a creature that can transform yourself. And so, and I feel like the difference, like one of our age differences, like I maybe started developing a sense of autonomy for myself a few years ago. So, like I don't care what my mom says anymore. But you seem to have a sense of that earlier. And what does it what does it mean to you to what back then? What did it mean to you to think that you could be something else? Because it just never occurred to me at a young age. Like, when did you realize? I mean, the next excerpt, you actually had the revelation of this thing you wanted to be, but there was a sense that you could be something else at an earlier age.
Yeah, I want to say I was, how old was I then? I was maybe like 14, 15 when I found that video initially, and it was right around Christmas time. So pretty much from the get-go, I was like, okay, this looks like a possibility, like whether it's common or not, like this person did it that I found, so it must be possible for me to do it, because this guy just looked like a normal person who did stuff, and I said, well, I'm a normal person, I can do that too, I guess. And so at that point, it was really with that in the back of my head, like I got rid of like all the bras I had, and my mom was not happy because they were expensive, and she made sure to tell me when I was throwing them all out that they were expensive, and got like sports bras instead because they were flattening just by a hint. And like just buying clothes that were branded as boy clothes, like that are like brand new, like I'd go to Hot Topic and buy like boys skinny jeans, and I'd be like, oh yes, I'm a boy now, even though I definitely did not look like a boy at all. But in my brain, like regardless of what other people saw me as, at that point it was very internal and kind of being like, oh, I acknowledge that I felt more comfortable wearing these different clothes. You know, a few months later, I convinced my mom to let me get like a pixie cut, because my sister had cut her hair. I was like, oh, I want to cut my hair too. So my mom let me get a pixie cut, and I was like, oh, now I look a little bit more how I want to. So it was kind of being comfortable with it internally first before I could kind of bring it out into like society, kind of, because I knew like, okay, I have short hair and I wear boys' clothes, like I do not look like a boy at all. I just look like a high school girl that's more masculine. But once I kind of started developing like, oh, here are the clothes that make me feel comfortable, here's a haircut that I feel comfortable in, then it could continue on to, okay, I'm gonna research this hormone therapy that you can do, and I'll go to a doctor and go to a therapist and get opinions on it and get like okayed for it pretty much. And at that point, like, my mom was not happy about that. She was like, you're gonna be infertile, what if you want kids one day, you know? And but I still knew like, this is what I have to do, even if it's not long term, in the moment, to help me kind of stay in that space of I feel good about myself for the time being, like, because I can always change it later on, but for right now, this is what I need, pretty much.
I mean, just having the internet and access to that kind of information is a huge difference. I don't know what time it is, but
We're good.
okay.
7:45.
One question I do want to ask you is that one of the differences in our stories is that, so you were a little more masculine in high school, as was I, and people had names for that back then, like Butch or Dyke or, you know, but that was never really a part of your journey. That wasn't a thing. And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but I think that I find it really fascinating that you didn't, and this is probably why we can't have lesbian bars anymore. But that the need for queer identity and culture and finding those people away from normative society, you somehow like just kind of skipped over that part or didn't need it. And so I think that there might be a whole generation that doesn't need queer gathering spaces. It's like, how do you identify now?
Now I kind of just am myself. There was a period of time where I was very much into like, oh, I go to like the gay club in college and meet people and, you know, do like the stereotypical like queer activities and things. But then kind of as I got out of college and just went on in life, it was more like I'm just doing, like I transitioned for me to feel better in a sense, and now that I kind of feel okay where I'm at, since I didn't grow up in that space at all, like the most that I had it was, I think halfway through my high school years, they made like a gay alliance club or something, and even then, it wasn't really much of anything. Like people just kind of sat in a room and hung out, and so like I went to it a few times, but that was like the most I had known of it, and it was very much like it only popped up if it was on the news or something. Like in my book, I talk about Thomas Beatty years ago on like Oprah, and I was like 10 asking my mom, how can this man be pregnant? And that was just confusing. She said, well, he has girl parts and not boy parts. I said, that's not possible. That doesn't make sense in my brain, but it also at the same time made sense. So it was there in instances, but it definitely, I never experienced it as a like community of sorts. It was just it just was there.
So like, do you identify as gay now?
I'd say so, yeah.
Like a gay man?
Yeah.
Okay. But you don't really go to like gay bars or hang out with gay guys?
No, I just don't like going to bars in general.
That's fair. That's fair. Me either.
I'm very
And one of the similarities I feel like we've had, and I've heard this anecdotally from other trans men, and it's sort of a curiosity to me, is that once you realize that you could transition and become this identifiable thing, not just changing yourself because you're sad and you want to change yourself because you really don't know what that change would entail. You talked about instantly being drawn to that, and I find that to be a very common occurrence. It's like just from that moment before talking to a therapist or starting testosterone or having any surgeries, just that realization, it's like it lifts some anxiety or burden instantly. And would it be okay if I just read a paragraph? Is that all right?
You do you.
It's
There are no rules.
It's pretty remarkable how similar I feel like those parts are. So I didn't watch a YouTube video. I had it ill-fated, one more ill-fated affair with a straight girl, and Jesus, and I was flying home from grad school after my self-imposed humiliation with that, and just trying to, anyway, so I was, and there was a full moon rising under the plane, and for whatever. So, but the moon only reminded me of my own failure and fraudulence that night. The moon told me it was time to be a man. So, I thought about this before, because I was 40, so I'd heard of trans people before. I thought about this before. There's no way I could have avoided the possibility in the world I lived in, which is extra cool. I admit I had occasionally thought it was a bit of a cop-out, but I'd seen my friends become happy and calm by transition. It might have initially been capitulation for me, though. I could not return to Hogwarts, Harvard, without an additional layer of protection spells. I gave in. I didn't want my presence in the world to be antagonistic and unintelligible anymore. I didn't want to be anyone's exotic pit stop ever again. I was thoroughly exhausted by all of it. And to my surprise, at the mere thought of becoming a man, an optimism sprang up to greet me like we had never met before. I was suddenly quite excited by the promise of facial hair and big muscles. I started wondering how soon I could start the process. I became impatient in my airplane seat. About 5 minutes had elapsed. Time for a whole new life. So, and I don't know, I just find it a fun fact that trans men often, or trans people, when they realize that that's the direction they're going in, it provides some sort of immediate relief. Can you identify with that, or?
Oh yeah, a big thing for me was it kind of, that relief came from, I don't know what it was, but it came from somewhere where I was kind of not diagnosed with depression, but I knew, you know, there was depression, self-harm going on like daily, and so I kind of found that out, and it kind of opened a door for like an avenue out, like away from that pretty much, and kind of I saw it as a solution to be like, okay, maybe I don't like how I look now, but now I know I can look this other way. And like, especially looking at the YouTube video, I was like, okay, I like how this person looks, so if they're happy with how they look, then maybe if I do it, I can be happier. And it was kind of like, that weight came from that self-harm right after I saw that YouTube video. It didn't stop, but a lot of it went away. And so that's when I kind of realized and put the pieces together, like, okay, this is something serious happening that I need to look more into and kind of see if it's the right path for me, because it got rid of all that negativity that had built up.
So that's my question about autonomy and development, and the question of, I feel like you mentioned self-love quite a bit, and I'm too Gen X and Western for that kind of concept. So, but the autonomy, wanting to go to a place of self-love instead of self-harm or self-hatred, and what do you think the relationship is between wanting to love yourself and feeling like that is the inspiration for transformation, or becoming exhausted by other people's perception, like society, just walking through the world being a source of confusion every day for people, or for yourself, or for other people's perception, as opposed to some sort of interior inspiration for transformation.
Yeah, I think definitely the internal part has to come first. Like, especially for me, like starting out, I didn't really care. Like, I cared what people saw me as, but I also knew, like, if I just cut my hair and wear different clothes, I won't immediately look how I want to. And I kind of had to internalize everything of like, I may not look how I want now, or even in 3 years, and even like right now, I look better to myself than I did, and I'm more confident in myself and my body, but it's still not 100%, because I don't think anyone ever gets to 100%, but, you know, focusing on the internal and kind of having the external as a secondary, like, sometimes people acknowledge me as a man and I'm like, cool. Sometimes random people call me ma'am and I go, I'll never see you again, I don't really care. Like, it's more, for me, definitely more focused on the internal, with the external being, like, nice, but also if someone calls me a woman, like just some random person, I'm not gonna get upset and cry over it, because I'm like, well, I'm confident in myself. So kind of how they see me would be nice to see me as the same thing, but I'm not gonna be all up in arms about it if they don't, because they're just some stranger passing by or something like that.
Yeah, I find that intention has a lot to do with my reaction. If somebody's trying to, if somebody's trying to be mean, then obviously
Yeah.
And that's a great segue into my final concept that I find really fascinating reading your book, and is that so much of the common narrative, I think, sort of transgender 101, trying to get cis people, or just, you know, because trans people are in the news quite frequently, especially in the last few years because of all the anti-trans legislation going on around the country. So I think the most convenient narrative to give people who either don't know trans people but want to be supportive is that you were just born in the wrong body. And if if you follow this protocol, you'll become the thing that you feel like you were meant to be, and then things are fine. And that deals very specifically with a binary. You're either male or female, and there was an accident at birth, and so you can transform yourself into the other side of the binary, and it's perfectly acceptable, kind of like gays getting married. But at the end of your book and at the end of my book, we both have sort of a complex and like a conflicting inner narrative for ourselves about our self-perception. Like you're saying, you can't ever get to the place where you're 100% comfortable. And testosterone doesn't solve all the problems. It solves some. And I think it's easier. But how can, and I think it's scary to tell people that you have some misgivings about this process because you don't want them to become anti-trans in general. And so, how do you think you can handle, like, America's not known for being really good at complexity. So, do you feel like you're continuing on a journey for closer to who you want to be? Do you feel like you're in a good spot right now? I mean, you're just experiencing normal life now.
Yeah, at this point, like, I'm done medically transitioning. I'm done surgically transitioning. There was a point where I said, okay, I have to go kind of all the way and change genitalia and all that, and then I said, no, like I talk about in my book, it is not advanced enough for me. Even if I did do that, I would definitely not be happy with it because there's so many concerns and issues that come out with it. And I think at this point, being trans is definitely, like, it was an avenue to get more comfortable where I'm at, and now it's kind of like, as opposed to what the title of my book might say, it's very much on the back burner of my life, and right now it's like, I want to find a good job. I want to write my book, do my MFA, do like normal adult things that being trans might impact some of it, like starting a family, that impacts it quite a bit, but it's not the focus anymore like it was before, kind of during and the beginning of transition.
Just give some space. A little safety zone.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Can I just read one more excerpt and then we'll just
Sure.
do...
Then after that, we'll have time for a couple of questions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Questions. And this, I mean, this is the paragraph that has to do with what we were just talking about. After all I've been through, I'm not sure I know what being a man implies anymore. I'm still quite unsure I was ever intended to embody conventional categories. They have yet to serve me anything but heartbreak. I don't think the born this way / born in the wrong body narrative applies to me. There are a great many people for whom it does, and I see its truth in them. The path to embodying one's gender is complex and personal, no matter how many commonalities we can discern. What would I look like if butch had been a prized gender norm in my childhood? Would I have disrespected my body in so many ways? Though most women have been a victim of sexual mistreatment at some point in their lives, it's not a requirement for basing one's self-worth in the capacity for objectification. my identity contorted itself painfully in its relentless quest to become an objectifiable object. Its impatient distortions have caused pain and summoned enchantment. So I can see it's both, it's good and bad. It's complex.
All right, now we have time for about 10 minutes or so of questions. Does anybody want to?
You got it.
Hi.
Hi, I don't know the book and didn't hear much of the conversation, but I just wanted to say that I'm also, I transitioned halfway, and then I started to realize what it was, and not necessarily needing to go all the way to feel whole. So I was just giving you guys snaps back here because I feel the same thing. So that's it.
Thanks.
I love that.
Oh, yeah, and why don't you handle
Yeah.
the question?
Okay,
Hi.
thank you, both of you. And congratulations on having a book.
Yeah.
And I was curious about your writing process.
So the book started as my master's thesis for my MFA program, and the goal for the program was to make 140 pages of publishable material within a year pretty much. And I set a goal for myself to say, okay, when I'm done with this thing, I want it to be polished enough to send it out to presses to get it actually published. And so the book it's hard to tell when I'm reading, but the book is very fragmented. It's got a lot of breaks and it kind of jumps back and forth a little bit. But I really liked Bluets by Maggie Nelson in my undergrad, and it's very fragmented and kind of goes back and forth in a similar way. And so I wanted the format to be like that, because I had never written anything this long before. I normally write 10-page essays maximum. So I was like, well, if I break it up, then it'll be easier to make 140 pages of it for me. And it was pretty easy in the long run, but I knew I wanted to I knew I had an end point, because it ends on a possibility and questioning is pregnancy a viable option for where I am now in life, and kind of those possibilities after everything else. And so I knew I wanted to kind of touch on key events in my life that hint towards bodily autonomy, kind of that process of not only being transgender, but what led up to it, kind of, and not clues that might have led to it, but in a sense clues that led up to it. So I kind of had the bones of it together already, and then to fill it in, I did a lot of little snippets of research. I used Melissa Phoebos's New York Times article. I used some studies done and stuff, some of that mix of memoir and research, so that way they kind of boost each other up and kind of help it get pushed along. If here's a thing I want to say and I don't have any personal experience to speak to it, but here's a study I found that talks about it that I can kind of jump off of. So it was kind of, I had the structure and bones in place, and then I just pretty much filled it in with, a lot of internal dialogue and research bits, really.
Christina.
I have a question. It has to do with safety and vulnerability, and I wanna be careful how I frame it, but I'll see where it goes. One of the things that I've encountered in my experience in queer community is sort of this initial guardedness when you encounter new people, and what the context is for when you encounter them. Do you encounter them in a space that is labeled safe, queer, or accepting, or do you encounter them at a Denny's getting some moons over my hammy, and you're trying to figure out what the vibe is, right? And if you're vegan, clearly that's not what you're ordering. That said, right, do you find that you are able to be more vulnerable now because you have claimed your physical autonomy? Has that been part of your journey, and could you talk about that?
Yeah, I would say definitely in a sense. Like, I didn't read from parts of it, but like when we were talking about it at times in the book, it goes into a lot of like personal stuff. There's a lot of like sex stuff going on kind of in the middle of it that has like leads up to a lot of like finding bodily autonomy through kind of giving it up in a sense, especially through like sex and other kind of intimate acts in a way.
Yeah.
So I'd say definitely in some senses, like in the context of this book that I don't know who's gonna read it, some random person could pick it up and then find me on the internet, and I don't know what will happen then, but in certain contexts, I'm definitely very open about like anything. Like people at my work, probably not, but like in the sense of like a book, especially if I know people might like relate to it, or it might help them find something in a sense, or get them thinking about something about themselves or someone they know, or just in general, it definitely, I'm definitely open, because my goal with the book especially was I didn't want to, a lot of trans narratives tend to kind of target either like the right side of politics and people that are kind of that minded, or like the far left side of politics and people that are more extreme on that side. And I really wanted to frame it as like, not that it appealed to both sides, but it was looked at more from like a center perspective where, you know, not all of the right-wing people might look at it and be like, oh, that's wrong. Like, there's research in there so people can look at that. There's personal bits so people like have that context of like, this isn't about, you know, being trans or something. It's just like a story that they can read, and no matter kind of what your thinking is going into it, that openness I think really helps people, even if they might not agree with everything, they might be more inclined to read it because there's that openness and kind of, there's no like sugar coating of anything really.
How are you in terms of vulnerability, Ty? You want to talk about that?
Sure. But in some ways, this has opened up passing is a complicated issue because there are a lot of trans people who don't pass or don't pass as well. And normally, if I'm wearing my binder, and I just pass this, especially now at my age, nobody cares. Nobody can even see me. I'm invisible. So I can go wherever I want and use whatever toilet I want. And so I think that getting rid of those sort of daily conflicts, I think they're called microaggressions, you know, it's such an alleviation of anxiety and stress that I think that my former habit of overcompensation in masculinity, trying to be real butch, kind of being a dumbass, like I think that I feel like I'm less of a dumbass now and a little more vulnerable and a little, like I don't feel the need to, and I'm fine with girly accessories if I've got them on or something, or I don't know, it's just, I feel just more confident in, I'm fine with my masculinity, so now I don't have to be such a jerk. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Last question, I think.
Great.
Or not. All right, let's go buy some books then. Thank you guys so much.